Joining me now, the 70th Secretary of State and a Fox News contributor, Mike Pompeo. Sir, it's good to see you this morning.
Good morning, Cheryl. It's great to be with you.
Your reaction to what you just heard?
Well, I think she largely has it right, and those are good words. It's important to recognize the threat from the Chinese Communist Party. It's something that when I was Secretary of State we did for the first time in 40 years, was to acknowledge the Chinese Communist Party's intentions to make our kids and grandkids live in America that's very, very different. So I was happy that she seconded the motion yesterday. Now it's about actions. The Biden administration allowed a balloon to fly over our country for 5 days. They continue to allow the Chinese to infiltrate our farm system. Think about the intellectual property they stole from farmers like those in my home state of Kansas. It's not about the words that she said yesterday. That's important recognition of the problem. But it's about how one responds to the threat from the Chinese Communist Party. And I hope the Biden administration will begin to actually take this threat seriously.
So far, it seems that they really have not, Secretary, but we shall see. I want to move on to the issue of Afghanistan. We heard devastating testimony yesterday in Washington on Capitol Hill about what happened the day that those 13 service men and women were killed at the Kabul airport. In particular, that testimony where we heard the sniper say that he saw someone, he reported it above to the people in charge, his commanding officer. He was ignored. And then right after that, that blast hit the airport, and he, of course, himself was injured. I know that you heard that testimony. I'm sure you were aware of the events that unfolded that day. But your reaction to what we heard and what should happen as far as Afghanistan goes, sir?
Well, sure, it was pretty remarkable testimony and absolutely heartbreaking. And as a former soldier, my heart goes out to all those who were impacted and their families. You know, we lost 13 of our own that day, and we left Americans behind in Afghanistan. This is something the United States has never done before. I was in the middle of this, Cheryl. It was time for us to get home. It was time to get our young men and women back from Afghanistan after 2 decades. But for 4 years, we drew down, and we did so in a way that protected the American people. We protected our soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines. And when President Biden made that deeply political decision, the decision says we're going to leave on this date certain, what the testimony we saw yesterday confirms is precisely what one would have predicted happened. We lost American prestige, we lost American lives, and it is a more dangerous world as a direct result of the decision that President Biden made that day. It was heartbreaking to watch that testimony.
It was heartbreaking to veterans, to their families. I actually have Rob Smith with me on set today, an Iraq War veteran himself, who obviously is just as heartbroken as the rest of us about what happened in Afghanistan. He does have a question for you.
Yes, Secretary, there was some very devastating testimony that we saw earlier on in the show. So my question to you is this. You have been very critical about the pullout from Afghanistan. You know that there's a loss of life, but there's also billions of dollars in U.S.-grade military equipment that was left in Afghanistan. Do you see a future in which American troops have to go back into Afghanistan to secure this equipment now that it is in the hands of the Taliban?
Rob, I hope not. We can't be sending our young men and women back to that place unless there's a direct threat to the United States of America of terror in the same way there was 20 years ago. Rob, your point's very, very well taken. We had the loss of life. We had the loss of American power around the world. But it's also the case now the Taliban has tools and equipment. They'll struggle to maintain it. They'll have problems. But make no mistake about it, that was part and parcel of the mistake that President Biden made. We left people behind. We left people who'd supported folks like you and your former colleagues in the military behind. We did all of that, and it was unnecessary. President Trump, we wanted out as well, but we were prepared to do it in a way that would have respected not only our American service members and the service they gave in Afghanistan for 2 decades, but we would have made sure the Taliban never got the equipment that they have their hands on today. That is dangerous and tragic as well.
So, Secretary, to be clear, you're saying that the U.S.-grade military equipment that is there, the Taliban is going to struggle to maintain it, so it's pretty much just going to be a moot point in the next, 10, 15 years. They're not going to be able to be effective with it.
So some of it's simple equipment. They'll be able to maintain that. They'll find a way to buy spare parts, all of those good things. But the most complex equipment that requires software and updates and maintenance, it'll be difficult for them to figure out how to get the supply chain on that right. It doesn't mean we won't have a bad day, Rob. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean they won't figure out how to use one of them, that the Russians won't help them, that the Chinese won't help them. All of those things are possible, but the chance of that they can actually build a force around it, that the Taliban can figure out how to engineer this stuff, is very, very low. They don't have that capability, and while they have the very real ability to use that equipment in the medium and near term, the chance of them being able to develop a force around that over the 10, 15, 20-year time frame is very low.
Well, I want to follow up on Rob's question, though, about that equipment, because there's now been multiple reports that there are dozens of terrorist organizations that are operating in Afghanistan, and they are using that equipment.
So I've seen that reporting. There's no doubt they will grab that equipment and they will use it. That's what I said. The challenge that they will face is how do you turn that into something that is an effective tool over the long haul. It doesn't mean that this was a good decision. It was a horrific decision President Biden made. And the fact that that equipment is now in the hands of our adversaries, the Taliban, who have every intention of continuing to kill and take on the United States of America, make no mistake, that is bad. But the bigger challenge we face today in Afghanistan is the debacle that followed from President Biden's decision. The whole world saw that. Vladimir Putin saw it. He invaded Ukraine. Xi Jinping is watching it, and he's thinking about Taiwan. Those are the strategic challenges that face our nation today as a result of what the president did.
Yeah. Well, I do want to move on to some domestic issues with you, sir. 4 Republican candidates already announcing a 2024 White House run, including your former boss, President Trump, and former U.S. Ambassador to the UN, Nikki Haley. All eyes also, of course, on Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. He's going to be heading to Iowa tomorrow. Secretary Pompeo, are you planning a presidential run?
It's going to be a rambunctious primary. I hope it's a competition over ideas and how to move this country forward. Goodness knows America needs serious, thoughtful leadership. We are certainly not getting that today. As for me, my wife Susan and I, we are trying to figure our way through this. In the next handful of weeks, we'll make our decision, and we'll let everybody know at the same time.
If you were, okay, they'll put it this way. If you were to put your hat into the ring, what would the things be most important to you that you would run on if you do make that decision to move forward? What do you think the country needs right now?
Show the same things I've been doing my whole adult life. We need a strong, capable military. We need an America that understands it's exceptional and great, not the 1619 Project, not a country that's teaching its kids crap in schools in the way that we are. We need true, serious American leadership here at home. We can get our economy right. We should walk away from these climate change objectives. And then we need a president who evinces confidence in the United States of America so that the next generation of Americans get all the same opportunities that you and I have had, Cheryl. Well, it's possible to do. I am confident the Republican Party will elect someone that will do that.
Okay. Well, please keep us posted on obviously your plans. But I do want to talk about the budget. President Biden is going to be debuting his budget today. Obviously, it's likely a non-starter because the House is run by Republicans right now. They control the purse strings. At the same time, there has been a lot of discussion about military funding and military spending in this. And there are those that want to cut the budget of the military. What do you think that would mean as we face dual threats from Russia and from China?
Yeah, that would be a mistake. It sounds like President Biden's top line number, at least, is a reasonable number. But as importantly as the actual number, it's how we spend it. It's how we focus our military. Do we say that the most important thing in the military is that all of our vehicles are carbon neutral by 2030 or 2040? That's what President Biden has said. Do we say that the most important thing in our military is that we have good, solid diversity, equity, and inclusion training? So I'm as focused on making sure the military has not only the money that it needs, but that it spends this money and focuses on the singular thing our military is designed to do: defeat our adversaries if we're unable to deter them. And when you lose focus on the mission, as I think our military is at risk of doing, that's a really dangerous thing.
But at the same time, those proponents that say that we'd increase defense spending would point to many in the military, these men and women, these hardworking, those that are serving their country they're frankly underpaid. And many of them are living sometimes on food stamps. Many of these men and women are living below the poverty line, especially when they're stationed in places like the New York area. What would you say to those that believe that we need to increase the pay for the U.S. military men and women that are out there right now?
It's not just what I say. I think I voted for pay raises for our military dozens of times when I was a member of Congress, as a veteran, as a former soldier, as a former young leader in the United States military. I saw that too. I saw our young soldiers with families struggle financially. We need to make sure and get that right. Cheryl, we're missing our recruiting targets today drastically. That does not bode well for our military 5 or 10 years from now. We need to make sure that it is an attractive proposition for these young men and women who raise their hand, show up at Army and Air Force and Marine recruiting stations all across the country. We need to take care of them and take care of their families. It is entirely possible to do. I hope President Biden's budget will include that, and I hope Congress will pass a budget that does that as well.
All right. Well, Secretary Mike Pompeo, it's always good to see you, sir. Please come visit any time, and we look forward to hearing.
Great to be with you.
We look forward to hearing from any announcements you wish to make with us. Please come back.
Yes, ma'am. Have a great day.
You too. All right.